In 2010, a man who had built one of the most secure criminal communication networks in the world was sitting across from U.S. authorities in Colombia. He wasn't a trafficker or a gunman. He was the architect. For years, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman believed he had solved the one problem that destroys every cartel: communication. Empires don't fall because of violence. They fall because someone intercepts a call, because a message leaks, because someone talks. So El Chapo modernized. He moved beyond burner phones and invested in encrypted BlackBerry enterprise servers, custom-configured devices, and a tightly controlled digital network. His empire no longer ran on whispers. It ran on infrastructure. And the man who built that infrastructure knew everything: the devices, the servers, the encryption keys, the architecture. When Christian Rodriguez was arrested in 2010, he faced serious prison time. He made a deal. From that moment forward, El Chapo's most secure communication system wasn't just protecting him. It was being quietly mapped from the inside. And once you understand a system completely, you don't have to break it. You just have to wait. Once Christian Rodriguez agreed to cooperate in 2010, U.S. authorities didn't immediately dismantle the network he had built. They didn't shut it down or expose it. First, they needed to understand how it had come to exist. Before encryption, cartel communication was chaotic but functional. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the Sinaloa cartel relied on burner phones, trusted couriers, face-to-face meetings, and coded language layered over standard calls. Phones were discarded quickly. Conversations were brief. Operations were compartmentalized. It wasn't sophisticated, but it limited exposure. That began to change in the mid-2000s. U.S. and Mexican authorities were expanding wiretap programs and improving signal interception. Telecommunications surveillance was becoming more precise. Even disposable phones left patterns. Towers logged connections. Metadata accumulated. El Chapo understood that communication had become the cartel's weakest point. After his 2001 prison escape, he grew more cautious. Burner phones reduced risk, but they didn't eliminate it. Every call still touched infrastructure that could be monitored. By the late 2000s, BlackBerry devices were gaining popularity among criminal organizations because of BlackBerry Messenger, which offered encrypted communication between devices. But El Chapo didn't want scattered encrypted chats. He wanted control. Around 2008 or 2009, the Sinaloa cartel sought someone who could build a centralized encrypted communication system. That's when Christian Rodriguez entered the picture. Rodriguez, a Colombian IT specialist, had experience configuring BlackBerry enterprise servers. Instead of relying solely on carrier-based encryption, he helped establish dedicated servers that allowed administrators to manage encryption keys, configure devices, and control the network from a central point. Hundreds of devices were eventually connected to this system, including phones used by high-level Sinaloa leadership. To El Chapo, this was modernization. Communication was no longer disposable. It was structured, encrypted, and centrally managed. But centralization creates something burner phones never did: a single administrator with full visibility. By 2010, Rodriguez wasn't just maintaining devices. He was overseeing the cartel's digital infrastructure. And when he was arrested in Colombia that year, that infrastructure didn't vanish. It gained a second set of eyes. In 2010, Christian Rodriguez traveled to Colombia. While there, he was arrested on charges tied to cartel activity. Unlike the traffickers and gunmen who filled prison cells across Latin America, Rodriguez wasn't valuable because of what he moved. He was valuable because of what he knew. By that point, U.S. authorities had spent years trying to penetrate the Sinaloa cartel's encrypted communications. They knew the organization had moved beyond burner phones. They suspected a centralized system. What they lacked was visibility. Rodriguez was visibility. Facing serious prison time, he was approached by U.S. officials. According to testimony he would later give during El Chapo's 2019 federal trial in Brooklyn, he agreed to cooperate with the FBI after his arrest. This wasn't a dramatic public flip. There were no headlines, no sudden collapse of the system. It was procedural and quiet. Rodriguez began explaining the architecture he had built. He described how the BlackBerry Enterprise servers were configured, how devices authenticated through the system, how encryption keys were handled, how administrators could access certain data and manage devices remotely. He identified which phones belonged to which members of cartel leadership. He explained how the network operated day to day. Importantly, this did not mean the FBI had suddenly cracked BlackBerry encryption. The math remained intact, but they no longer needed to guess how the system functioned. They had the blueprint. With Rodriguez's cooperation, investigators could map device relationships, track communication patterns, and monitor activity linked to key figures in the organization. Instead of attacking the network from the outside, they were studying it from within. Meanwhile, the system continued running. Devices stayed encrypted. Messages continued moving. Leadership kept communicating. There is no public evidence that El Chapo knew Rodriguez had begun cooperating. From the cartel's perspective, nothing had changed, but something fundamental had. The administrator of the system was now describing it to the people trying to dismantle it. And for the first time, the Sinaloa cartel's digital fortress was no longer opaque. It was understood. Understanding the system was only the beginning. After agreeing to cooperate, Christian Rodriguez returned to his role without altering a single visible detail. The network remained active. Devices synced normally. Calls moved cleanly through encrypted channels. From the cartel's perspective, nothing had changed. But Rodriguez began studying something different. Not what was being said, but how the system behaved. He noticed that major operations produced distinct digital rhythms. Before a shipment moved, certain devices activated in tight clusters, exchanging bursts of communication before going silent. When internal security concerns surfaced, a different pattern emerged. The same inner circle accounts lighting up in compressed windows of activity. The encrypted network wasn't revealing content, it was revealing structure. Rodriguez began cataloging those patterns. Which accounts consistently activated together? Which devices went dark before leadership moved? Which communication bursts preceded short-term relocations? Instead of forwarding transcripts, he forwarded structure, activation overlap, time windows, frequency spikes, and unexplained silences. Investigators layered those signals against independent surveillance, vehicle sightings, temporary rentals, utility usage, travel corridors. Individually, the signals were weak. Together, they began narrowing geography. At the same time, pressure inside the cartel was increasing. Shipments were being intercepted more frequently. Couriers were detained at inconvenient moments. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to raise suspicion. Guzman interpreted the disruptions as internal disloyalty. He turned to Rodriguez and ordered enhanced visibility within the network. Devices were configured to log expanded activity metrics. Communication frequency reports were reviewed. Relationship heat maps were examined in private briefings. Rodriguez sat beside Guzman while lieutenants were quietly evaluated, loyalty measured by digital proximity. The irony deepened. The more paranoia spread, the more centralized communication became. Fewer intermediaries were trusted. More decisions moved through a smaller circle of accounts. Operational coordination tightened into shorter, denser bursts. The system that was built to eliminate vulnerability was becoming more predictable with every layer of control. By late 2012, Rodriguez identified a critical behavioral signature. When Guzman prepared to move personally, the network shifted in a specific sequence. Secondary accounts went silent. Security contacts activated first. Then a compressed series of logistical exchanges followed. Vehicles, temporary safe houses, short stays. The pattern was subtle, but consistent. Rodriguez marked it carefully. In early 2013, a high-volume shipment through the Pacific Corridor generated the clearest signal yet. During coordination, a familiar cluster of security-linked devices activated repeatedly over several nights, a configuration that had previously appeared only when Guzman was physically nearby. Rodriguez documented the overlap and passed forward the structure without speculation. Surveillance tightened quietly around coastal properties. Rentals were reviewed. Short-term occupancy patterns examined. The circle narrowed without public noise. Inside the cartel, confidence remained intact. Messages delivered. Encryption secure. Internal suspicion redirected toward lieutenants instead of infrastructure. Rodriguez maintained his role, installing requested monitoring tools and answering Guzman's questions with steady composure. But by then, he understood something fully. The network wasn't just protecting the organization, it was predicting it. By the time Guzman began spending extended periods in Mazatlan, the pattern no longer surprised him. The system was functioning perfectly, and it was quietly closing in. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. He passed the final structure to U.S. authorities. Not transcripts, not speculation, but the timing framework that confirmed movement patterns around Mazatlan. The behavioral signature was clear enough. It aligned with surveillance already in place. That was enough. After the transfer, he received quiet instructions of his own. He was told to travel to a specific location under routine pretense, a controlled handoff point where he would be extracted without drawing attention. There were no dramatic departures, no public disappearances. He stepped out of the system the same way he had operated within it, quietly. For years, no one suspected the source. The betrayal became public only much later, when Rodriguez testified in court, and the architecture he had built was finally described in full. By then, the arrest was history. The system had worked perfectly, just not in the way they believed. Thanks for watching. Check out this video about how the Soviets stole their own destruction.